And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Welcome to the second installment of our 2024 regular session legislative preview. We covered a lot of ground in the first preview episode of the regular session, and we have just as much ground to cover today. But before we do, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Psalm chapter 79, verses 11 to 13. And it says, "Listen, Lord, hear the sighing of all the prisoners of war, all those doomed to die. Demonstrate your glory power and come rescue your condemned children. Lord God, take what these mocking masses have done to us and pay it all back to them 7 times over. Then we, your devoted lovers, will forever thank you, praising your name from generation to generation." And I know that in the New Testament, Jesus teaches us to pray for our enemies, and that's where we get, I think, pretty tangled up and confused as Christians. We should absolutely pray for our enemies. But when the masses are mocking morality, mocking God, mocking biblical values, and sending our children down the path of hell with their lies and warped version of morality and right and wrong, it's our duty to rise up against that in prayer and in action. We can pray for their hearts to turn to God while praying that their efforts are shut down and that they pay for the harm that they've caused to innocent lives. So let's remember that Jesus also taught us that the thief who steals bread to feed his family still has to pay back 7 times what he stole. And as we think about how much the enemy has stolen just in these last few years, it's okay to be angry about it. Be angry, but do not sin, is what the Bible says. Channel that righteous anger into a demand for justice. This is not a time to be soft on evil. I think that's been a big part of the problem and why we're facing what the level of evil we're facing now. In the way that we view it, respond to it or pray about it.
Yeah, and, it's interesting, Danielle, there does seem to be a different dispensation on some level, Old Testament versus New Testament, but Jesus did come to fulfill the Old Testament. And people have this image of Jesus, unfortunately, and I think it's a very distorted image, sort of a soft pacifist type of personality that just walks around with flowers in his hand and teaching people how to do the kumbaya. That is absolutely not who Jesus was, and that's not a faithful depiction of the scripture. Jesus forcibly drove money changers out of his father's temple in a fit of profound and righteous anger. Jesus directly confronted the most powerful religious leaders of his day and called them a brood of vipers with cold and dark hearts, and that their surface propriety was always perfect, but inside they are rusted and corroded. I mean, he was absolutely not some weak-kneed pacifist by any means, and he believed in tough love. And what we're talking about, we do everything we can do, we do with love, but sometimes we have to say things that wake people up and speak the truth. And sometimes the truth is not pleasant, but it really is an act of love to speak the truth, even when it's not pleasant to do so. That in and of itself is an act of love. And that is what we're trying to do and will do. And I think that is consistent with the temper and the message of Jesus.
Yeah, and you're so right, Chris. And, I think it bears mentioning that Jesus's anger is related to justice. Every time that Jesus confronts evil, it's because it's harming innocent people. I guess it's because sin does not touch some other people. Sin does affect the world around us. And so if there is some level of evil, it has to be confronted because it's corroding, it's hurting, it's abusing or imprisoning or in some way limiting the voice or the health of another person.
That's right. And, the scribes and the Pharisees, the head of the Sanhedrin, the great Jewish governing body, they had become so legalistic in the way that they approached the law. And I'm not saying that they were not acting sincerely, because the rules that had been laid down were very, very rigid. And they were simply trying to follow the rules as punctiliously as they could. But Jesus came and established, not only through his own words, but through St. Paul, that we are no longer slaves to the law. Man no longer exists for the law. The law exists to serve man. And we are not under a dispensation of condemnation for failure to follow the law anymore. And that is so vitally important. It's like when Jesus healed on the Sabbath and they wanted to crucify him and kill him because he healed a man on the Sabbath. And he said, would you rather that I don't do good? Are we not allowed to do good because it's the Sabbath? If one of you had a lost sheep, wouldn't you go look for him on the Sabbath if he was lost? So basically, this was all about establishing that the law and the prophets exist to serve us and not the other way around. And I think that's very, very important that Jesus was able to establish that we are to act in love. Love is what is the supreme motivating characteristic of everything we do. As St. John said, God is love. It's not simply this rigid adherence to written law every day so you can stand on the street corner and puff your chest and so people can see what a great sacrificial lamb you are. That's not what Jesus was about. And I think we have to have flexibility in the way that we approach things.
Yeah. And we've said here before that mercy triumphs over justice. And so while there is a justice aspect to this, your point on love is absolutely equal. And I think that weighs in the balance. And God is the only one who can hand out justice and mercy in the correct proportion to every situation. And I am hoping that we will see some of that justice and mercy and love and righteousness perpetuated at the Capitol this week through the beginning of the regular session, Chris. I'm really hoping that we'll start seeing a lot of friendly faces down there. I want to remind our listeners to please find a way to get to the Capitol at least one day during the session and see how our legislature functions and dysfunctions. Hopefully you will see more of the former, but if you see the latter, it will embolden you to get more involved. Just ask Chris about that.
Yes, and it will, and it can truly be fun if you have a group of people there. And it can be very emboldening and very inspiring knowing that you're there making a difference for the next generation, making a difference for your neighbors and for citizens in Louisiana. And just know that you're part of an organization that is speaking for everyday average Louisiana citizens, which is what we're so proud to do. I'm just so excited about the possibility of having a number of people down there that I haven't even met yet, kind of showing them the ropes, encouraging them about how to do things, and showing them what a big difference they can make, because your voice counts. Your voice matters to us. And we want to hear what you have to say, and we want you to help you get your voice out there, because nobody has the voice that you have. You have a unique voice and a unique perspective to share, and we want to hear it. And that's why we want you to come to the legislature and also email us. email us, reach out to us, and just let us know who you are and what the issues are that concern you. There's a lot that you can do, and you can do it in a way that you feel happy and enriched by, because we fight joyfully. We are joyful warriors, Danielle. The LeCag German Shepherd joyful warriors.
That's right. And you can email us. I know, Chris, you mentioned an email. If you're wondering where to email us, you can do that at info@lecag.org. And the other thing I just want to mention is follow us all session long on the State of Freedom. We will be bringing you updates on the moving of legislation, calls to action. Also on calls to action, go to lecag.org and sign up for our action alerts. And just so y'all know, we are working really hard to get good Louisiana-based guests on the show and national figures on the show. So we have a lot in the pipeline that we're excited about, and we hope that you stay tuned.
Yeah.
But Chris, we've got a lot. Go ahead.
I just want to say this before we get into the bills. 2 things, if you can hear my voice right now, that you absolutely need to do. One is go onto the LeCag website and sign up for the action alerts. They're very easy, very user-friendly. And if you get an action alert, once you've done that, send the email straight to your legislator. It makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference when they hear from us, number one. And number two, listen to the State of Freedom regularly. We are a family listening program, and the people who listen to the State of Freedom, and it's growing more and more every day, are part of our family, part of our army. And that is where you can gather accurate information on all the issues, the legislative issues we're dealing with, even national issues, because of the great guests that we have on. But it would be a privilege for you to be a part of our listening audience, sharing and contributing the State of Freedom. And if you're able, donating to the State of Freedom, because there is no political voice in Louisiana, I can assure you, no platform like ours. And I don't say that with the slightest amount of arrogance or self-importance. I just know what we bring to the table in terms of uncensored constitutional conservatism and the capacity and ability to bring those voices to the show. So we're just thrilled about it, and we need your support, and we're hoping that you will share and subscribe to the State of Freedom, because you're just not going to find anything else out there like it.
Well said, Chris. Absolutely. So let's go ahead and get off to the races. We have 11 more bills to cover in this episode. The first one is House Bill 491 by Representative Kathy Edmonston. And I just think this one is based on basic human decency, Chris. This is about the concept of second chances. Would you tell us about this one?
Yes, this bill will amend the law. Right now, a person who has been convicted of a felony crime of violence in Louisiana will never, ever be able to get a certain vocational license, in this case, a locksmith license. I believe it applies to other vocational licenses as well. So this bill would be a start. And Representative Edmonston's bill says that if a person has been convicted of a crime of violence, they're not automatically precluded from getting a locksmith license. If 15 years passes between the date that they complete their sentence or probation or whatever it is, and the time that they apply for their locksmith license, then the licensing board has the authority to consider their application. Doesn't have to grant it, but they have the authority to consider their application in all the circumstances to see if it is warranted, because we believe that it is just basically unfair as a matter of law and as a matter of, as you said, of basic fairness, to say, okay, someone made a serious mistake, and for when they were a young man, and for the rest of their life, they will never, ever be able to get a locksmith license and we know someone, Danielle, whose father owns a very successful locksmith business. He's very close to his father, but because he was convicted of a crime of violence 20 something years ago, as of right now, he can't take over his father's business. And I just think we think that's unfair. And we believe that this bill will bring a measure of fairness to that process. So we're hoping it will pass, and we're hoping that this young man will be able to take over his dad's locksmith business. He is a fundamentally different person than he was when he was convicted. And as you said, Danielle, either we believe in the power of redemption or we don't. I believe in the power of redemption. I can't call myself a Christian and a follower of Christ and someone who recognizes my own colossal mistakes and sinfulness and then not extend that and try to create an atmosphere of justice for other people, or else I'm just a hypocrite. So that's what HB 491 is about, and I am very excited about getting it passed.
Yeah, I absolutely think that reform and efforts in that direction deserve reward. So looking forward to seeing that one move forward, Chris. Now I'll switch gears into the realm of education. We have two bills here. The first one is House Bill 320. It's being brought by Representative Chuck Owen, and it will repeal certain teacher training requirements and student training requirements, and it allows Bessie to adopt policies that require inclusion of certain topics. And I mean, the basic overarching theme here is get the woke out, right, Chris?
Get the woke out of town now. Get the woke out of town now. You know, this bill reflects the fact that the Bessie Board, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education in Louisiana, has now been almost completely reconstituted with good, constitutional, thoughtful conservatives who really want to protect us.
And praise God for that.
And praise God for that, because of a lot of hard work from a lot of people. And this bill is repealing some of the old requirements that the more left-leaning Bessie Board had handed down, just cleaning it out and giving the new Bessie Board the opportunity to come in and adopt new policies for both teachers and for the training of teachers and for the teaching of students. Certain things will be required to be included in the student curriculum. I think this is a wonderful development, and it's going to help to clean out, as you said, to clean out the woke. You know, we could say clean out the woke until we go broke, and I'll be stoked. And
no, we're not going to say that.
I'm not going to go say that. I'm not going to go say that publicly. Of course not. But I will be stoked if we do clean out the woke and get a new good student curriculum in there. And these Bessie Board members are going to do it. And I'm very glad that Chuck Owen's bringing this bill, clean out the garbage.
Yeah. And Chris, one thing that we talked about when we were looking at this was that this is the legislature keeping the Bessie Board in check. And this is a reflection of the checks and balances of the legislative and administrative branches, or executive branch, right?
Yes. This is a great example of the legislature exercising proper oversight over the Bessie Board and repealing some of these old rules and old standards and categories that Bessie had that really need to be swept out to make way for new policies that are much more in line with the values of Louisiana citizens and much more protective of both teachers and students. So we're very excited about it.
Yep. Next up is House Bill 545 by Representative Amade. It provides the crime of obscenity for materials in public school libraries. This one is very confusing as a read. So, Chris, I definitely want you to explain it, but there's a lot of negatives in here. And really, it seems to be the main point is that it's getting rid of a loophole regarding immunity for criminal liability of having obscene materials in public school libraries.
Right. And I can explain it very simply. Right now, the crime of obscenity in Louisiana, and we're talking about the transmission of like obscene materials. We're not talking necessarily in this instance about someone physically acting in an obscene way in a place. We're talking about the transmission and the distribution of what is obscene materials, okay? Someone prosecuted under the crime of obscenity. But there are certain places where the crime of obscenity has been excluded, like in public libraries or in museums or in places of art and in educational institutions where the crime of obscenity doesn't apply, because the idea is to encourage art, to encourage education, and you don't want to suppress the expression of different ideas, even if some ideas are more radical or avant-garde than others. Education is supposed to be where ideas and information flows freely. So that's why traditionally this crime of obscenity wouldn't apply in public libraries. But now it will, because this legislation excludes public libraries from the scope of exclusion from the obscenity law. So now if you're engaging in any kind of transmission of obscene materials in a library, public library, the people involved can be criminally prosecuted for that. And
this is public school libraries K through 12. So this is not inclusive of universities, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is K through 12. It doesn't apply to the college universities, but kindergarten through 12, the public library exclusion from the obscenity laws no longer applies. Representative Amade, from this point forward, because of this bill, public school libraries and the information being disseminated in there can be subject, and probably will be subject, to prosecution under the criminal obscenity law. And that's a very, very good change that Representative Amade has made. And the reason why she's making it is obvious, Danielle, just because of the increasing amount of filth that's being pushed through the public libraries.
100%. I was thinking, the original definition of obscene was probably like, the anatomy book in your biology class. That's what they needed to make an exception for, right? Because there's a naked human there. But now obscene has gotten so much more obscene. It's just, straight up vulgar and evil. So I think it makes perfect sense that Representative Amade is moving to protect children in a greater measure, and I congratulate her on bringing this bill.
Think about Danielle, how important this is going to be for these leftist woke librarians who now understand that we better be careful about what we're doing, because we don't get to hide behind the quote educational institution exemption anymore. We are open.
It's really brilliant. It
is brilliant, and I think it's going to have a healthy deterrent effect on the dissemination of some of these materials. Thank God. And Representative Amade is so smart to bring this.
Yeah, she is. Next topic up is around pregnancy and abortion. The first one is Senate Bill 276 by Senator Thomas Presley, and it creates a crime of coerced criminal abortion through fraud. Basically, if there's an abortion happening that the mother is not aware of. And Chris, maybe you can just give some background on this. It's a really harrowing story.
It is a harrowing story. Senator Thomas Presley, who is a good friend of our shows and a good friend of the CAGs, has a sister who was married for about 10 years. And her husband, during the course of the marriage, tried to very surreptitiously and secretly abort her unborn child by spiking her drinks with abortion pills, and by in other ways trying to secretly get an abortion to be induced without he even knowing about it. Well,
that's absolutely sick.
She began to suspect it because of his behavior, and got smart and put cameras up in her house, and actually saw him mixing the little ingredients and putting it in her water and presumably even her food. So she caught on to it. The problem was that she had been taking this stuff for a while before she knew. And her unborn child was ultimately born, but because of what this crazy husband was trying to do in killing his own child and her child in the effort to do that, caused a lot of developmental problems with their child. It's now 18 months old, alive and doing reasonably well. But anyway, this is Thomas Presley's sister that this happened to. So this legislation that he's bringing will criminalize the what's called coerced abortion through fraud. Basically, when you have a husband who is trying to induce an abortion in his wife without her knowing about it, is that can be severely prosecuted. Now, believe it or not, right now, Danielle, there really isn't a specific statute that criminalizes that particular behavior. So I think this is going to serve a very, very good purpose moving forward.
It's absolutely shocking what happened to her. And I just really applaud Senator Presley for being, this is a very vulnerable, very personal issue, but bringing it to light because he understands that this stands to protect other women going forward. And so just a huge word of thanks and support to him and his sister. I believe her husband has been sentenced and is behind bars for a little period of time, not as long as he deserves. But I'm grateful for that.
Which is why Senator Presley wants to bring the bill, and he got 6 months. 6 months in
That's
prison.
Unbelievable.
I mean, think about this. This is in Texas. 6 months in prison for taking active steps to try to kill his own unborn child behind his wife's back. And that gets 6 months. That is what I think motivated Senator Presley to bring this legislation and to make sure the penalties that are associated with this are commensurate with the crime. Because as you said, it is sick, absolutely sick, and certainly deserves a lot more than 6 months behind bars.
Yeah. And Chris, you mentioned when we were discussing this that she was able to save the life of her baby because she had access to the abortion reversal pill. And I did not even know that an abortion reversal pill existed, but it does exist. And actually, it was Representative Amade who brought legislation in 2021 that mandated disclosure about the abortion reversal pill to all women who were administered the abortion pill. And since the trigger law came into effect after the Dobbs decision, the abortion pill is no longer legal in the state. But I was talking to Debbie Melvin. She's actually the person who shed light on this for me. And she thinks that there should absolutely still be public posting of the availability of this product because people are, let's not be naive. People are probably getting this product mailed to them from who knows where and get it, or getting it across state lines. And so if they have any regrets, I think there's a certain period of time that people can still take this pill to reverse the effects of the abortion pill, which, starves the fetus, starves the baby. And it's just so horrible. But anyway, I think we would love to see this bill amended to also include some mandatory posting guidelines of the availability of the abortion reversal pill in the state of Louisiana.
I think that would be a perfect amendment. Obviously, Thomas Presley's sister credits the abortion reversal pill to the fact that her child is alive now. And there are a lot of people who do not know about the abortion reversal pill and the fact that it can be very effective if it's used in sufficient time because of the time delay between taking it and the time that the unborn child actually dies. And so I just think this is a perfect bill to include that. And I'm going to recommend to Senator Presley that he add that into the bill. And I know Senator Presley well, and I'm sure that he would understand the importance of that.
Yeah. And, big thanks to Debbie Melvin for always being on top of these pro-life issues. She's a wealth of information and just a warrior for life. So thank you, Debbie. I hope you're listening to Sode.
Yes. And I call Doss Heineman, our good friend, D-Man, and I call Debbie Melvin, her name is D-Girl. So we got D-Man, we got D-Girl, we've got, we're slowly but surely building up our good nicknames on our Signal chat.
All right, let's move to the next bill. House Bill 164. This is being brought by Representative Boyd. It is, I mean, it's just a horrible bill. It is the only one that I think we're talking about between last episode and this episode that we not only oppose, but vehemently oppose. And it provides abortion exceptions in the case of rape or incest. And basically, in my view, I think you would agree with me, Chris, this is trying to blow a cannonball sized hole in Louisiana's abortion laws.
Yes, and it's so interesting, and it's kind of unbelievable that in this day and age, with all that we know about, life and the development of life in utero, there's no question we're talking about a human being. But this particular bill, I wanted to say that it legalizes abortion in cases of rape or incest, but actually, the law would simply say that the taking of the life of this unborn child in cases of rape or incest does not constitute abortion. So it's no longer a definition of abortion. That's number one. So you can do it. But even more importantly, it says that there's no proof required. If a girl or a woman goes in and says, I'm pregnant and I was raped, there's no investigation that has to be done. There's no witnesses that have to be called to make a determination about whether it's true or not. Absolutely no corroborating information is required. She goes in, she says, I was raped, I want to have an abortion, and under this law, that's it. And it's over. I'm like, this is, so not only is it intrinsically wrong because we're talking about taking an unborn child, even if someone could agree with abortion in the case of rape or incest, she doesn't even have to prove that she was raped. She just has to say it. I mean, you talk about blowing a hole in it. I mean, this would indirectly open us up once again to abortion on demand in Louisiana, because all you got to say when you go in is, I was raped, and that's it. And they got to take you at face value. This is a terrible, terrible bill. And I'm sure Debbie Melvin will be sitting right down there in the Criminal Justice Committee and testifying just like she has always done so eloquently against this bill.
Yeah. And just to say that rape or incest disqualifies the baby from being, from being a baby in law. That is literally one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
It is, and it's not that I or you do not have great sympathy for girls or women who have been raped, or for the crime of incest, because it's absolutely a crime. And my arms go around and my heart deeply goes out to any woman who has experienced it's horrific to have to go through that, and it's absolutely not lost on me and not lost on you. And there's a lot of compassion coming from my heart about it. I promise you. I'm not sitting up on my high horse here, beating the drum and trying to. In other words, this is not just it's not victim shaming. It's not blaming the victim. Thank you for that. It's not. I understand. We just have to. I'm just trying to be morally and intellectually consistent as you are, Danielle, and say, okay, how does the circumstances of the conception of the child justify taking of the life of the child? Is the child less valuable because these were the circumstances of his or her conception? Do they have less of a right to life? Do they have less intrinsic dignity in the eyes of God? And the answer to all those questions is no. And so the only consistent position is that we have to fight just as hard to protect those unborn lives as we do any other. And that's why we oppose this legislation. And we're certainly hoping that it will be defeated for all the right reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And that moves us along nicely, Chris, to the next bill, which is Senate Bill 278, being brought by Senator Jackson. And it is to provide support for vulnerable pregnant women and provides after birth care. And it also, I think you mentioned, prohibits any funds from this support. It prohibits that any of the funds for this kind of support goes to abortion. I really love this bill.
The more I read about Senator Jackson, the more I hear her speak, the more I'm just impressed with how thoughtful she is and how sensible she is on a number of cultural issues that she recognizes the threat that's being posed to our culture. She's very pro-life, but just as Representative Curry from Mississippi mentioned on our show and passed legislation over in Mississippi, Senator Jackson, this legislation here, SB 278, will create the Louisiana Pregnancy and Baby Care Initiative within the Department of Children and Family Services in Louisiana, and will create not only this agency, but will create the funding source to provide protection and support for vulnerable moms and their newborn children so that they are not out on the street, so they are not desperate until they can get back on their feet and establish their lives again. Because it's not fair to them to on the one hand say, be hardlined about abortion, no abortion under any circumstances, because that's the way we are and that's the way it should be. But we also have to be able to provide the support that is necessary for them to be able to bring their child into an atmosphere of love and provision for whatever period of time is necessary until they can get on their feet, go get jobs and move forward in life. And this legislation is so important. And I'm so glad that Senator Jackson is bringing it.
Yeah, I am as well. And I'd love, Chris, of course, as a constitutional conservative, really believe that this is ultimately the role of the church. It's not the role of the state, right? But apparently the church is not providing the support that women and children need at this point in time. And I really, if my tax dollars go to support babies and women, I'm good with that. I don't really want it to go through the hands of LDH either. So maybe we can talk to Senator Jackson about that. I don't know that it necessarily would, but I would love for this to remain pure, and untainted by the woke tentacles of LDH.
Absolutely. And I am very glad that it prohibits any funds from being used directly or indirectly for abortion-related services. That's a very important part of the bill here. But I agree with you, Danielle, that this ultimately is not the function of the state. It really is the function of the church. It's the function of private charity. But I can go along with this and believe in this because I understand how important it is. I have sisters. I know people can be in bad situations. And it's, as Representative Curry mentioned to us on the phone, this is not meant to be a permanent fixture. This is meant to be something to help them for a period of time until they can recover and move on. And hopefully that's what it will be. And look at all of the things that we squander money on in the state. Look at both in our state and in our federal government. This is one of the least expenditures that I would object to. There's a long line of expenditures that
before you'd get to this one.
Before I would ever get to this one, I promise you.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping, that helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at danielle@freedomstate.us for more information.
Okay, well, now we're going to move on, Chris, to SB Senate Bill 306 being brought by Senator Kathy, and it will increase penalties for commercial sex trafficking, including life without benefits and a $75,000 fine if the victim is under the age of 18. And as you and I were discussing this, I think that every single person who's involved in human trafficking of any kind needs to go to jail forever. And if they're touching minors, they need to go to jail forever and ever. That's my point of view.
Yeah. And in the criminal law, Danielle, there's something called principles. There's the primary actors, and then they have people called principals who are helping facilitate, cooperating with it. And the principals are considered just as legally culpable. And the way the commercial sex trafficking law is written in Louisiana, it's broad enough to cover everybody in the net. All across the chain. And so what this legislation would do, it increases the penalties for commercial sex trafficking, particularly if the victim is under the age of 18. And if the victim's under age of 18 and you get convicted of commercial sex trafficking, in other words, you're doing it for money, you are automatically going to prison for the rest of your life with no benefit of probation, parole, or suspension of sentence. I think that is an appropriate sentence. I'm trying to think, Danielle, if I can think of any crime that I'm more horrified by than the thought of trafficking children for the sexual perversion of adults for money. I cannot think of anything more perverse. I can't think of anything more worthy of an immediate summary execution firing line, quite frankly. But we can't do that anymore because we live in a quote unquote civilized society. And of course, I do believe in due process, but it is a horrible crime. And I applaud Senator Cathy for bringing this bill. If you get convicted of this, then you're going to die in prison. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah. And this is one where you can't be tough enough in my perspective. So thank you very much, Senator Cathy. And I would look forward to having him on the show sometime soon to talk about this bill and some of the other bills he's bringing as well. Okay, now on to the topic of personal liberty. We have some interesting bills in this one. The first one is one of my personal favorites for the entire session, and it is being brought by Senator Seabaugh. It's South Bill, Senate Bill 21, pardon me. It is making it so there are no more electronic red light tickets or speed tickets. This is just amazing, and I just love the constitutionalist mindset behind this bill, Chris.
Oh, absolutely. How many of our listeners, Danielle, have been out riding around or whatever, get home, and then a week or 2, 3 weeks later, they get something in the mail saying that they've been cited for running a stop sign or cited for running a red light. And they've got a picture of their vehicle. They've got the citation number. They've got all this stuff on there, and they give you a certain amount of days to pay it. You don't get to confront the police officer. You don't get to subpoena the traffic the traffic light to see whether you were rolling through it or not. It totally violates something in the Constitution called the Confrontation Clause, because this is a quasi-criminal deal because they're trying to deprive you of money. So they give you a day to show up in court. You show up in court. You don't get to present any evidence. You don't get to have the officer there. This is basically totally unconstitutional to be charged with a crime, and you don't get to confront any of the evidence against you or the witness against you. Nobody, nothing. And this bill is doing away with this absolute nuisance to our lives and unconstitutional infringement on our freedom. And it says, in the future, there will be no automatic speed enforcement devices, no mobile speed cameras, and no red light cameras. So, Danielle, no more getting these tickets in the mail at $250 or $300 that you're having to pay to the government. It's over and done if this passes. And I am so thrilled about this. You have absolutely no idea how happy I am about this bill.
Well, Chris, I mean, I will just absolutely hug Senator Seabaugh if this one makes it all the way through. In my view, these are just money capturing devices. You know, these are money makers. This helps the cops not have to have quotas. I have no interest in ticket quotas. To me, that is complete garbage. And Chris,
the only time, Danielle, the only time anybody should be cited for any quasi-criminal offense that requires them to appear in court and or pay money is if they are stopped by a police officer and issued a ticket and given a real court date where they can go assert their right to confront the police officer and any other witnesses and put on a defense. And if they can't do that, they shouldn't be getting these types of tickets, period.
Let me give you a hypothetical situation that I feel the opposition is going to bring in committee. So let's say that I'm at an intersection, Chris. I blow through the intersection. I run a red light and T-bone somebody. And it's just one person in their car and it's me in my car and no one else is around. It's their word against my word. Is there any recourse for people in these situations if we get rid of the camera?
Well, first of all, most of the time, fortunately, most of the time, the person who ran the red light tells the cop they ran the red light. So that's rarely a case where someone who ran a red light bashed into a car is going to say that. If that happens, however, these traffic lights are programmed and you can subpoena or request the traffic lights and it shows the sequence. It shows when this light was red and when the adjacent light was green, and you can find out with absolute precision who had the red light and who had the green light if it comes to that. So that's not an issue.
And Chris, because we're talking about being in vehicles and personal liberty, I have to bring up this bill, Senate Bill 98. This is the dead cockroach bill that we killed last session. I think we killed it the session before that. Senator McMath has resurrected this stinking dead cockroach and is trying to criminalize cell phone use in cars. So I just want to really create a contrast for people here. Senator Seabaugh is trying to give us more liberty, more freedom, return ourselves to more personal sovereignty in our vehicles. And here's Senator McMath trying to tell us that the state knows that we're even thinking about our cell phone while we're in our car.
It is such a dichotomy and such a contrast here. God, you and I have talked about this for many shows. We've talked about this, and this bill from Senator McMath, as you said, criminalizes talking on a handheld cell phone in a car. It's not about text messaging. It is about talking on your phone while you're driving. This would criminalize it. Would tell a police officer can pull you over if he sees you do it. He can issue you a citation. He can demand that you go to court and pay substantial fines for this on a first offense. It is unbelievable that the level of infringement on personal freedom that this would entail. And number one, and number two, what is this going to lead to? Police officers are always looking for reasons and pretexts to further infringe the citizen's privacy. Police officers are looking for evidence. That's just the way they're made, many of them. So they're going to pull someone over for talking on a cell phone. And before you know it, they're looking into their cell phone. And the next thing you know, they're looking into their vehicle. This creates a precedent whereby further infringements could occur. And number three, this is going to significantly drive up the motorist insurance rates because insurance company will use this in their actuarial calculus as a major liability risk, and your insurance premiums are going to are going to go up. But the most important reason why this should be opposed is that, as Ed Tarpley pointed out during committee when they pushed this bill last year, there is no connection whatsoever, no scientific connection, no empirical connection between someone talking on a handheld cell phone in a car and major traffic accidents. There's just no comparison. So even from a practical point of view, there's no reason for the legislation. I don't know who's behind it. Is it the insurance companies behind this? Because they stand to make a bunch of money? I mean,
you know what I heard, Chris? Well, that's true. I did hear that it's Mothers Against Drunk Driving, but I'm not sure why Mothers Against Drunk Driving would be so worried about cell phones,
Well, I don't know why
personally.
they'd be so worried about cell phones when there's no comparison, when there's no statistically relevant connection between simply talking on a phone while you're driving, talking on a phone, and traffic accidents. I mean, if they're going to do this, Danielle, why not prohibit letting your little child, ride in the back seat with you when you're driving? Because I don't know of any mom who never turns around when her kid's in the back seat momentarily to talk to them when they're driving. What about prohibiting even having a passenger in the front seat because of the distractions that creates? I mean,
What about snacks?
what about snacks in the car? What about reaching down to turn your radio up or to change the music in your radio? It's like there are certain things that in a free society people have to be trusted to do responsibly, and we've got to be able to do that. Opens the door for more Big Brother government and more encroachment upon our rights. And I cannot stand this legislation. I can't stand it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was completely wrong when I said the only bill that we oppose in this lineup is the one by Representative Boyd, because we oppose this one, even though we didn't count this one. I just had to bring it up for free, and we oppose the next one as well, Chris. House Bill 234, also by Representative Boyd. Go figure.
Yeah.
It is it is aiming to prohibit employment discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. Chris, tell us about this one, because some of the way that this bill is laid out is pretty head scratching.
It is pretty head scratching. Right now, constitutionally, Danielle, there are certain categories within which an employer simply cannot discriminate solely on the basis of. You can't discriminate against a potential employee or employee on the basis of their race or their gender or their religion or their ethnic origin or their creed. Those are things that are fundamental constitutional protections that you can't discriminate based upon. Well, Delicia Boyd in this bill wants to add to that category, into that category, gender identity and sexual orientation. So under her bill, one of the fundamentally protected categories in employment discrimination would be gender identity and sexual orientation. So if a person goes into a mechanic shop and wants to be hired as a mechanic, and he's a transgender, and his profile, his demeanor, his temperament simply does not fit in well with the clientele in that work environment, he can allege, and so that he doesn't get hired, that transgender or that person with a different sexual orientation can then sue the employer and allege that you didn't hire me because of my gender identity and my sexual orientation. And then the employer has to go back and prove why it was important that he not be hired. But the presumption would be in favor of the person bringing the lawsuit. So she wants to add that. You want to talk about opening up lawsuits against employers across Louisiana. This is what would do it. Demand letters. This has to be defeated. We do not need a law in Louisiana creating a protected category in our law for hiring and firing for gender identity and sexual orientation. I just think it will make an absolute mess. It will drive employers out of this state.
As if we need more of that. And Chris, there was similar legislation that we talked about last session that I believe it did get defeated. And whenever that legislation got brought, I talked to my friend who's a recruiter, and she told me that she has told me since this whole transgender kind of movement popped into the cultural scene, that the whole point is to create another protected class of people in the workforce who are completely unable to be fired. And so she was in opposition to this on moral grounds and on practical grounds. But I hope we can. I think we can I think we have some people who are pretty reasonable and will see this defeated.
I think so too. And Representative Woody Jenkins testified last year before the Senate committee and did a very, very good job obliterating this particular bill. I was down there that day, and I thought he did a wonderful job with it. So I wanted to mention that. But yeah, this will create just a flood of lawsuits, and it's going to put businesses out of business and drive them out of the state. And so, yeah, terrible bill has to be defeated.
All right. Well, next up, we're moving to the theme of good governance. And this House Bill 103 by Representative Mike Johnson, I was very excited to see it. He is continuing on the theme of transparency, I believe, Chris. This bill would require certain boards to be broadcast live via TV or internet. And I love this because it's bringing transparency to governance, even though it's agencies or school boards or whatever. The people deserve to know what's happening behind closed doors.
Absolutely. And when you have busy moms, and busy dads who may not be able to go to every school board meeting, but they're very interested and very concerned with what's happening. Well, this bill requires each school board and parish governing authority in a parish with a population of 25,000 or more, and each governing authority of a municipality with a population of 10,000 or more to broadcast live all of their public proceedings in meetings, including their committee meetings. They have to broadcast them live in real time. And if they broadcast them live in real time, Danielle, I would assume that they would archive it. So even if you can't watch it in real time, you could watch it later that night or the next day. But this, as you said, is a great mechanism of increased transparency. One of the big complaints parents have had is that they don't have access to the school boards. They don't really know what's going on there. And this will give them insight into really what is occurring on the school boards and on the governing, on the municipal authorities as well. And so it's a very good bill. I'm glad Representative Johnson is bringing it, and will create transparency.
Yeah, and I think we ought to take a little bit closer look to make sure on the archive point, because that was something that came to my mind when we were just talking about it as well, that I didn't recall seeing that, but it doesn't mean it's not there. And the other thing is we may be talking to Representative Johnson about asking for an amendment that would include mandated public comment periods in particular meetings, or, if you meet monthly, maybe every other month or something, but making sure that the public also has an option to weigh in on the proceedings.
Yes, and Representative Amade brought a bill to that effect under the Edwards administration, and unfortunately, we had too many rhinos to get it out of the House. But it was a very, very good bill, and it would, as you said, just would designate one school board meeting a month for what's called just open topic for any parent to go and address any issue of concern to them once a month. I think that's very, very important. And also on the archive, I was just assuming, Danielle, that if they were going to be live streaming it just like they do at the legislature, surely they would have an archive that you could go back and watch it. But we can clarify that. You'd think it would.
You would think. Yeah, absolutely. And then the last bill that rounds us out is House Bill 526, and it's by Representative Beau Bilyeu and Representative Guyman. And it will tighten the rules for raising the spending cap. And we know that that's needed based on the debacle of last session.
Absolutely. This is a pretty long bill, and there are a number of rules associated with it. But we can safely say that this will make it more difficult to raise the legislative spending cap, and it will tighten the rules for establishing what that spending cap is. So it is obviously a good bill. There were virtually no constraints, as we saw in the 2023 session, and this legislation is being brought to avoid that type of debacle again. So I applaud Representative Bilyeu and Representative Guyman for bringing the legislation. Much needed.
Yeah. And even though, I guess, Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're not going to see a budget this session. We'll see one next year. Right. Is that right?
Yes, that is exactly right.
Okay, great. But I really hope that the leadership in the finance committees is more disciplined and demands discipline of the committees and frankly, the whole body to get that bill seen in a more transparent way. Maybe we need to put Mike Johnson on that one, get the bill seen in a more transparent way, get it seen sooner. And so people actually know what's in it, because this last year was completely unacceptable. People didn't even know what was in it. People were being bullied into voting for the stinking thing that they didn't even know what it was. And now we, as taxpayers, yet again, are paying the bill and reaping the consequences of that kind of bad behavior at the legislature.
Absolutely. And if there's any debacle that warrants this bill and warrants tightening that process up, it's the embarrassment of 2023, which was an embarrassment for everybody in the legislature.
Yeah.
It was an embarrassment for our state, the way that went down. So I'm confident that this is going to get through and that we're not going to have an issue like that in the future, at least not nearly to that degree.
Yeah. Well, Chris, that rounds out the second half of our 22 bills, the last 11 bills that we were going to mention in our preview. Although I know that there's many, many more. As we said at the outset, there were over 1,100 pre-filed bills. So we certainly will not be able to follow them all as closely as we will be following these and some others that will inevitably
Yes.
pop up over the course of the session. But like we have said, if there are things that come on the radar that we're not covering, flag them for us. We can't see and be everywhere. For sure, flag them for us. But also make it your personal priority. If it means something to you, get to the Capitol and do something about it. Get on the testimony list or put in a red card or a green card. We want to see you there.
And let us know, Chris@lacag.org, or what other email, Danielle, can they send to? Info?
Yeah, they can, info@lacag or info@freedomstate.org.
Yes.
Or not freedomstate.org, freedomstate.us, sorry.
Yes, info@freedomstate.us, chris@lacag.org, or info@lacag.org. Email us and let us know what bills you're interested in, and we can help facilitate your testimony or facilitate your coming to the Capitol. We want you to be closely associated with LACAG and the State of Freedom. We want you to be part of our family and what we are doing, because we know that you align with our values, we align with your values, and there are strength in numbers. And I just want you to remember that you bring a lot to the table. You have music inside of you that the world needs to hear. And we want you to understand that. You've got a voice and a message that nobody else has, just because you were created uniquely by God and you have greatness in you. And we want to help you get that greatness out of you. And that's what we're going to do. If you reach out to us and come on down to the legislature, email us and call us, and we'd love to help you.
Yeah. And if you're looking for a way to support the State of Freedom and the work that we're doing here, the ability for us to bring fantastic guests and just important information that sheds light on what's happening at the state legislature across our state and even at the national level, please visit our website, freedomstate.us, and you can make a donation there. You can also send a gift to P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana, B-O-U-R-G, Louisiana 70343. And as everyone probably knows, Chris will be at the legislature. Basically, he's just going to bring his tent and his sleeping bag and be hanging out there the entire session. So come down to the legislature, but also visit us on lacag.org. Help support the work that we're doing to be your voice, your eyes, your ears at the Capitol. And you can also, Chris, give a gift to by sending something to the P.O. Box.
Yeah, P.O. Box 64952, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70896. I want to emphasize that if you like being able to use your cell phone in your vehicle to talk on it, and if you believe that you're able to do that responsibly, and you don't want to hear sirens behind your car pulling you over a police officer and issuing you an expensive citation and setting a court date for you to go to court so that you can stand in front of a judge and take a half day out of your life or a day out of your life and deal with all of that inconvenience and stress and harassment. Please support LCAG, because we will be on the front lines in the legislature fighting to defeat this legislation. If you are tired of getting mail from some remote law enforcement organization, supposedly, or collection agency saying that you ran through this red light and we have a picture of it and you better send $180 or $200 by such and such a date. Or if you want to have some kind of a hearing, you can call 1-800-268 if you can get in touch with anybody. And if you want to avoid that hassle, if you want to get rid of these red light tickets, support LCAG. There's so many other things that we're fighting for regular citizens on in the legislature against big government overreach. You could not invest in an organization that is any more devoted to you, to your freedom, and to your interests, and help us level the playing field in the legislature. You can rest assured and sleep well at night knowing that we are there if you help donate and contribute financially so that we can be on the same level playing field with the big special interests who are trying to take your freedom away from you. So we are deeply humbled at your generosity that we've already received. And we ask anybody who can hear my voice right now to please be as generous as you can. Join LCAG and donate to LCAG. And of course, the State of Freedom, which is becoming the political platform for constitutional conservatism in Louisiana. And it is an incredible joy to work with you, Danielle.
Yeah, same here, Chris.
And really is. And we are going to continue moving forward each day with joy and happiness and God's holy grace to take another step to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Yes, we will. Have a great one, Chris.
You too.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.